Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. We're covering the Asa Ellerup case, of course, the wife of Rex Heuermann, and the whole thing behind doing a documentary on the case of a serial killer who is yet to be tried. I don't think this has ever been done before. And the attorneys who are advising her, they better be very, very careful with their counsel, as any slip up could put her in the hot seat. And I'm not totally convinced that Asa Ellerup is cleared from this potential indictment, this crime that her husband is going to be put on trial very shortly for. The Gilgo Beach case, so far they have him for 3 of those murders and potentially a 4th. So the surprising thing of coming up with a documentary is I don't know if we've ever been down that road before. So hang on, you're about to enter the off-the-cuff land, Police Off the Cuff.
There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch by Collider.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Welcome right back, guys. We have an unbelievable panel tonight to discuss this happening, this unprecedented documentary being filmed simultaneously with right now, a triple murder that someone's being tried for. Joining me tonight is straight out of Brooklyn, retired NYPD detective Phil Grimaldi. Welcome to the show tonight, Phil.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you for having me.
And also, what would it be without the voice of reason? Retired NYPD sergeant, attorney, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, Sergeant Mike Geary. How you doing, Mike?
Bill, good evening. Good to see you. Good evening, Phil.
How are you, Mike?
And I had to stack the deck tonight by bringing in the feds. I brought the feds in, but he's very NYPD friendly. His dad and his brother were both NYPD sergeants. He's a Long Island boy. He's a Hofstra law grad. So we'll excuse those 3 letters FBI. But welcome to the show, Bobby Chacon.
Good to see you, boss. Thanks for having me.
You know, Bobby, you're a favorite of these fans. I got women here going, "Oh, is Bobby Chacon coming on?" I go, "You want me to show that scuba diving shot?" I didn't load that up today because I think you're getting sick of it. But
Thank you.
Anyway, Phil, I'm going to start with you.
Yes, sir.
Is this an unprecedented thing that the wife of a serial killer is being offered 7 figures to tell her story? And careful about the story you tell.
Absolutely, Billy. I don't think we've ever seen this before. And a little bit of research that I did earlier today, I think her attorneys, they used the word that after the July 13th arrest that she was left destitute. So I think that they're looking for some sympathy in that respect. Her attorney, Bob Macedoni, was quoted as saying that. And then, we have a thing in New York called the Son of Sam law, which means that the perpetrators of crimes can't profit from it. But they used a loophole in the Son of Sam law. They didn't pay her to be part of the documentary that they're doing. They paid her a licensing fee of $1 million for archival footage. I guess it must mean previous videos, pictures, stuff of that nature. So again, they skirted around the Son of Sam law. So no money is going directly to her. It's going to her on a licensing fee, and none of the money can be used for Rex Heuermann's legal defense, or it can't go to him directly. So as long as the money, the way the law reads, if the money doesn't go directly to him or for his legal defense, they get around it, and she's going to get $1 million.
Bobby, I'm going to go to you next because we don't like to keep the feds waiting. What are your feelings about this? You know, we want to get into the moral question of it. There's definitely a moral question of it, but it's because no one's at all mentioning the victims.
Yeah, you know, and Phil mentioned, if I could quickly talk about the Son of Sam laws that people are most familiar with, because David Berkowitz is named after a New York City case, right? But what most people don't understand is all of those laws that were passed in the early 80s after Berkowitz and stuff, they were all thrown out. The Supreme Court threw them out. All the Son of Sam laws were thrown out. They were declared unconstitutional, restriction on the freedom of speech. And then all the states had to go back and redraft those laws to kind of conform to the Supreme Court. I think it was Simon & Schuster versus Crime Victim Board was the Supreme Court case that said these laws are basically an unconstitutional restriction of someone's First Amendment rights. And so they were all drafted much more narrow than the original Son of Sam laws. After the Supreme Court came down and struck them down, the states all went back and redrafted, and they're much more narrow now. And they don't, you know, they were very broad initially, and so now there's much more you can do. Sometimes even the person actually that committed the crime can, in a way, benefit from it. But I think that, you know, in this field, I'm in this field now, and I try to sell TV shows oftentimes about cases like this. And Phil's right; they often, and I've even been the recipient of these licensing fees where they can't pay me because they're a news show or something like that. But if I give them a piece of video or give them a photograph, then they can give me a licensing fee, which is basically the same thing as my talent fee would have been, except that they can't call it that. And it, you know, the lawyers always seem to be able to figure out a way around these things. Now, I think there's such competition now among the streaming services to get these cases to the air, right? We've seen some of these rush jobs could get it now, but really we've been told in the past is you got to have a conviction, appeals have to have run. You know, the lawyers are very risk averse with a lot of these things. This is why this really surprises me, because, you know, the network lawyers are usually very risk averse, and they pull back on anything to have to do with if there's not a conviction yet. You know, all of this stuff, you have to be very careful in what you say. But I think what I've seen happen is they're going to follow her around, and I don't think they're going to air anything until after a jury trial and after either an acquittal or a conviction in the case, at least at the trial phase. They may even wait till the appellate phase is done. But I think that what they've been given is access. So they're following. They're going to have all this and this is just from an entertainment standpoint, all this amazing footage of her and, you know, her visits with him and stuff. So it's going to be compelling footage that people are going to want to watch. Like you said, there's a moral question in there, but as far as an entertainment value, if you can get in there and get that footage as it's happening, even if it's shown later on in a program, you know, it can be quite compelling.
These are the two attorneys. To the left is Vesmetev, and he represents the adult children. Victoria Ewerman, she's 26, and Christopher Sheridan is 33, and to the right is Robert Macedonio. They were on the scene right when the search warrant was being done, because they right away slapped a lawsuit on the police department. They've destroyed that house, which I heard looked like, you know, Pearl Harbor after the bombing before the search warrant, you know. So, you know, you question, I mean, these guys, they're known attorneys out in Suffolk County, and they smelled the dollar. Mike, your thoughts?
Billy, everybody's got to get paid here. You know, Johnny Ray's got to get paid. Everybody's got to get paid. They're working hard. They're billing these hours out. They got to get paid. And, you know, we saw this similar thing with this situation in the Murdaugh case. Before the Alex Murdaugh trial, homicide trial took place for his wife, against him for his wife and his son's death, there was already like a Netflix documentary done that I actually saw regarding Alex Murdaugh's son, who was involved in the boating accident, and where he was going to be charged with manslaughter. And they were interviewing a whole bunch of the kids that he'd hung out with over the course of a couple of years and grew up with. And that seemed rather odd, considering, you know, that case hadn't even yet come to trial too. and Murdaugh, eventually Murdaugh would himself, the father, would be charged and convicted of homicide. But the time frame, as Bobby Chacon said, it used to be there would be a movie that would come out several years after the trial was over, after everything was done. Now they're doing all the prep work ahead of time. They're getting a licensing fee to Asa Ellerup. She's allowing them to have all kinds of pictures. Then who knows, there may be some sort of voiceover she's going to do. There's going to be videotape from family birthday parties and things like that are going to backfill a story that's going to be completed later on, I should say pre-fill a story that's going to be finished later on. And they're compacting the time frame from start to finish. And it is kind of strange because things that may be said. I'm sure she's going to be very circumspect if she's going to say anything. If I'm her attorney, I don't even want her to say a word. But it is strange how quickly they can act on this when we haven't even set a trial date.
The New York Times yesterday spoke about this case in this. After Rex Schumann was arrested in July and accused of slaughtering women found bound in burlap and buried along a desolate stretch of Gilgo Beach, his family was left reeling and destitute. With their dilapidated Massapequa Park ranch house turned inside out by investigators, Mr. Human's wife, Asa Ellerup, and their 2 grown children were left to sleep on mats and cook on a grill in the front yard in full view of news crews and true crime gawkers. Things got so bad that the daughter of a West Coast serial killer created an online fundraiser. But where some evil, depravity, and tragedy, media companies saw pay dirt, swooping in with lucrative bids to turn the whole thing into content. Peacock, the streaming service owned by NBC Universal, is paying the family to participate in a documentary series covering the family through Mr. Human's trial, which is likely to begin next year. The intense bidding for Miss Ellerup's story and the payment caused an outcry from relatives of women whose remains were found in the Gilgo Beach area, including those of Shannon Gilbert, whose disappearance several miles from Gilgo in 2010 led to the recovery of other victims. So the New York Times just spoke about that in that fashion yesterday. And I know that Robert Macedonio has been quite critical of John Ray, the attorney who represents the family of Shannon Gilbert. I'm going to play a little bit of John Ray, and we'll just see what he has to say, because he implicated Asa Ellerup in a press conference. But let's hear what he has to say here.
La Trapeze, which is notorious for, it's a swingers club. They even have, you belong as a member. And to go in there, you have to have a partner, and to leave, you have to leave with the same partner. She would go there with her partner, who was a New York City police detective, and she would go where she said there were quite a few other police officers who were swingers who were there. I've had that confirmed by other witnesses from La Trapeze. She would go and there on celebratory dates such as Valentine's Day or Halloween and the like, or right around those dates anyway. And in this instance, she went with him to the place in Massapequa Park that had been revealed or advertised in La Trapeze. But they went with, in the back seat, a young girl who was hungry and disheveled, and took her with them. Now, how they came to have that girl, the witness doesn't really know for sure how her driver partner had come to have this girl, but he had her. And the peculiar thing that she mentions, the witness mentions, is that this girl is leaning over in the back seat and bent over towards one side, bent over. What she didn't know, this witness, is that Brigada had just been recently in a car accident that had disabled her back. So that little fact was an interesting fact.
So this is him repeating what he said in the press conference, where he said this triumvirate, basically a New York City detective from narcotics, this woman who is the affiant of the affidavit, right, from 27 years ago. And it just so happened the woman in the car with them who they picked up in New York City was Karen Vergata. I mean, I don't know if I bought that story, but all in the media bought it hook, line, and sinker. Now all of a sudden you hear nothing about it. Have you heard about that, Bobby?
I haven't, and I you know, as he's talking, I'm wondering about the relevance to it, of anything. I know lawyers like to throw a lot of stuff up there, you know, and muddy the waters, and they can do that. Prosecutors can't, but any other lawyer usually can. And so as he's talking, I'm just like, look, you know, a homicide case is a homicide case. You have to focus on the evidence that relates to the homicide and some of the other stuff. So I'm as he's talking, I'm going like, what's the relevance here? Like, you know, what's the allegation? If he's inferring something, I certainly, or he's implying something, I wasn't inferring it. I just couldn't get to where he was going with it.
Well, where he was going, Bobby, was he was implicating Asa Ellerup,
right,
in being involved in swinging with these people who came from New York City to their home in Massapequa Park. And
yeah, no, I get that part, but like, then you're going to then have to make the connection between a swinger's lifestyle and a serial killer. There are lots of swingers, in the country. There are lots of swingers clubs. I don't know the connection between that and a serial killer of women.
He also makes big jumps in that statement. He's saying that that's Karen Vergata. We don't know for certain that that's Karen Vergata. He puts a couple of things out there, a girl that had just been arrested, which I'm sure they checked to see if she had been arrested around that time. And then now he's saying that she was in a car accident. There's an injury. That's why she was leaning forward. And, you know, he's making a lot of assumptions. He's putting this whole thing together. Now, apparently, let's say the person who signed the affidavit did visit this La Trapeze Club or whatever it was and was a swinger. He's connecting it all to Rex Heuermann and Asa Ellerup, and I don't think the connection is there. I don't see it. He makes these giant leaps, so to speak. So again, a lot of that stuff has to be investigated and vetted. And if there is a connection, then there is a connection. I don't see it though.
Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, Billy, as we discussed a couple of months ago when this first came out, he dirties up Asa Ellerup pretty good. He said that when they went out to the Massapequa Park, Asa was supposed to have intimate relations with Karen Vergata or something like that, and then Rex Heuermann and the Rex Heuermann and the off-duty officer, narcotics officer, were supposed to be getting intimate together. And the whole implication was that Asa Ellerup was a willing participant in swinging and knew that that Rex Heuermann brought girls to the home, and that's where it's been said that maybe the girls were murdered in the home, which would implicate Asa as knowing that these homicides were going on, or at least knew he was bringing women to the home and having intimate relations with them while she was either there or not there. So,
well, the whole reason I'm bringing this up is to show whether or not she can be implicated in this case and thus become a subject. And how appropriate is it to take this documentary? I'm going to play this from Banfield.
Crime doesn't pay. I've heard that so often. That's what they say anyway. We sure hope it doesn't pay, right? It shouldn't. The wrong thing to do. But if the crime is big enough and you're close enough to the action without being locked up yourself, sometimes you can come into money. And so can your lawyers. I call your attention to this week's court appearance in the accused Long Island serial killers case. That's Rex Heuermann, right? The guy who's been brought in and doesn't have bail. That there's his wife in the middle. Reported at the time that she's actually the soon-to-be ex-wife. Her name is Asa Ellerup. She's been struggling financially, and things have been rough for her and her two adult kids. But they came to court for the first time in a Mercedes, and there was a TV crew in tow. And tonight we can report exclusively that Ellerup and the couple's two children signed a production deal with NBC Peacock for a documentary about their ordeal. NewsNation's Paula Froelich reports that they're being paid at least $1 million for this. Their lawyers are getting about $600,000, and they may not be the only family pondering a payday like this. because Paula also reports that the family of Brian Koberger has a similar offer, but has not signed on the dotted line yet.
So, no mention, of course, of the victims. And I can't
Right.
even imagine the victims' families, how upset they are at this occurring. That, he's about to go on trial for the murder of Megan Waterman, Melissa Bartolome, and Amberlynn Costello, and they're awaiting the evidence to charge him with Maureen Brainerd Barnes.
Yeah.
And then when they start hearing that they got $1 million and these two attorneys, I'll call them attorneys. I was going to say ambulance chasers, but
Be careful.
I didn't see their Adidas. They were wearing shoes. They didn't have their track shoes on so that they could chase those ambulances. But it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. It really does. This horrific crime, and before he's even charged, the family's getting $1 million, and the two attorneys are getting $600,000 if it's News Nation's report is to be believed, if it's true. I think it's a bit upsetting.
Billy, Peacock was quoted as saying that they asked the members of the victims' families to be part of the documentary. However, some turned it down, some didn't respond. But Shannon Gilbert's sister, Sherry, was quoted as saying that now we're going to be re-victimized and re-traumatized. The first words that came to her mind were disappointed, disgusted, and frustrated. The victims and the families are going to be exploited once again. And I have to agree with her. I mean, something like this that happens way down the line, we haven't even had a trial. If you look at some of the major cases like Donnie Brasco, for instance, when that went down, it took maybe 10 years, 15 years before they came out with a movie. And, a lot of these things usually take time. It seems like in the world of technology today, they were on this the minute that Rex Heuermann was, arrested. That second attorney, that Vesmetev, supposedly he works for the production company, which is Curtis Jackson's company, G Unit Film and TV, or he represents some of the members of that. And that's how this whole thing got started. And Peacock is going to be the one that's going to stream it. So again, no mention of victims here, no sensitivity. There's a moral ground. We did talk about that, and they definitely crossed the line here.
Well, when they talk about politics makes strange bedfellows, how about the law? There's Vesmetev, one of the attorneys for the Heuermann children, with John Ray. He used to be his partner. So it's like, it's a small world. And I'm not saying it's not uncommon. Attorneys out in Suffolk County, they work together and they know each other. But it's too interconnected, Robert Macedonio and Vesmetev were on the scene of the Heuermann crime scene before you could say Heuermann, and they were looking for an angle to make bucks. Bobby.
Look, I always think about, I would be shocked if the Suffolk County Task Force investigating this case did not already look at this angle, look at the wife's involvement and look at any of this stuff. I mean, look, we got very experienced, very good detectives, obviously broke this case. And I would be shocked if they didn't already vet that out. I mean, these are sharp guys, men and women probably. And so I would be, and that's really them, and the prosecutor in Suffolk County are the people who should be deciding the culpability of the wife, not any of these lawyers, not Peacock. If the wife has any culpability in these crimes, it's the prosecutor's office and it's those detectives on that task force who should be running that out. And I'd be shocked if they hadn't done that already.
Well, Bobby, early on, when they took the case down, when Rex Heuermann, I think it was at the end of July, was it, that he was arrested?
July 13th.
July 13th. They immediately, and Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison, who we all have a great deal of respect for, former NYPD chief of department, chief of detectives, and then he went out to Suffolk County. They said immediately the wife is not involved. And I thought I know they had 12 or 14 months, which they put the case together against Rex Heuermann, but it still seemed rather quick to just clear the wife. I felt. Professor Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, Billy, it did seem very interesting because as they cleared her of the death of the three girls, they cleared her based on the fact that her travels, that she was out of the state for one instance, She was in Iceland at the time of another, they believe, another homicide, and somewhere in someplace else for a third. So they did. I'm sure, as Bobby said, they vetted that. They looked at, you know, her passport, her travel documents from the State Department, phone records, and things like that. So they probably did a good job that way, and it was probably a very solid call that on their part that she wasn't involved. However, this is where she could get herself in trouble if there's ever anything further uncovered. Just because you're cleared doesn't mean you have immunity. She, you know, there's no statute of limitations for homicide or for conspiracy to commit homicide if they ever saw that angle where she could possibly have had any sort of involvement, however small, in the selection of a female to engage with and have intercourse with and kill, or to dispose of a body or do anything like that. So I don't think she's going to be doing a lot of interviews or talking, even with this, her involvement in this sort of thing. But there's always that possibility that even though she's cleared, if anything further comes, any further new evidence comes to light, they could revisit her clearance and say, you know what, she's not so clear. We may have some sort of criminal conspiracy here.
That's an important distinction. I mean, being cleared is not a legal term. It's not a legal definition. Right. There's nothing legal about being cleared. That just means that at that point in time, they didn't think she was involved. That doesn't handcuff the prosecutors or the police in any way of going back and charging her. I think that in this case, if she has any culpability, it would be, and I speaking from a behavioral standpoint, and I'm not a profiler, but I do work with profilers a lot. It would be unusual in this kind of case. Now, unusual things happen all the time. It would be unusual for a serial killer to enlist a killer of women to enlist his wife. Where her culpability may lie is if she did things that kind of helped him cover things up, and not unknowingly or knowingly, or leaving herself enough wiggle room to say, I didn't know what I was doing when I threw this out, or I threw that out, or I took a load of stuff to the dump and dumped it off. She could have some culpability of kind of after the fact crimes, where she'll probably say inadvertently, but she may have felt he was up to something and not known, but also at the same time helped, get rid of something that she thought maybe, I don't know this. This is just conjecture on my part, but I think where her culpability could lie is kind of accessory after the fact type of stuff, where she may have gotten rid of some stuff that she felt, not that she knew what he was doing. Maybe she knew he was up to some kind of something wrong, and then she helped kind of get rid of some, not a body. I'm talking about like other types of evidence that she may have helped. And of course, she would say that was inadvertent, but that's, I think, where her culpability might come in.
Bobby, I think there's no doubt that he was at least psychologically abusive. He may not have been physically abusive, because we would see domestic violence reports, or that the police had been to this house XYZ amount of times. But I have no doubt that he was psychological. I mean, you look at the house. The guy's an architect, and his house is the worst house on the block. It looks like, a homeless shelter, and it just doesn't fit his persona of being a business owner in Manhattan, having an office in Manhattan, takes the train out to Massapequa Park, which is a nice neighborhood on Long Island, and his house sticks out like a sore thumb. Phil, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I believe that the investigators probably were satisfied. They corroborated she was out of the country at different times when we believe the murders took place. That's probably why they said, we feel she's cleared. Now, did she have knowledge of him playing around with sex workers or going to swing clubs? That's really a question that needs to be answered. And again, Bill and I talked about it earlier. There was a documentary with Robert Durst, who had killed several people, and during the one of the breaks, he went into the bathroom. He still had the mic on, and he said, "Yeah, I killed them all." So again, she really is in danger of putting herself in a trick bag for something of that nature. I don't think that she's involved in the murders. As Bobby said, most serial killers don't enlist other people, especially family members, on things of that nature. So I have to agree with that. So does she have knowledge of him? Yeah, go ahead, go play with your sex workers, and I'm going away to Iceland or whatever. They had a long marriage. Bill and I both feel that perhaps he was some type of an abusive family member towards the wife and the children. The house, from what we heard from, intimate details from detectives that were on the scene, it didn't appear to be anything but in disarray. So again, that's all earmarks of, I guess, a chaotic lifestyle in the home. So I think it's not a stretch to say that perhaps he was maybe psychologically abusive towards the family.
I want to play this of Dan Abrams, like another little cut from News Nation.
Stunning new potential evidence tonight in the case of
It should load up.
Suspected Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann. It turns out his estranged wife may have known about his alleged double life, even supposedly accusing one of the sex workers who came to their home of stealing her clothing iron from their home. John Ray, attorney representing victims in this case, spoke today alongside Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison about what a witness told him about the wife, Asa Ellerup.
He was a serial user of sex workers. He would sometimes have them come two at a time to his house, and his wife was home upstairs, and in one instance got very angry at one of the sex workers because the wife believed that the worker had stolen an iron from, for ironing clothes, and had it in the car with the driver.
Bizarre, it sounds the sex worker allegedly accused of stealing the wife's iron, and that's what she was upset about. The estranged wife, whose attorney will join us in a moment, has not been named a suspect, but her hair was found on duct tape on one victim and on the head of another, according to court records. The police commissioner did answer questions, too. We should point out he was not wearing his police uniform, as he has in past conferences about the case.
We have the information. We're working it, and we'll see where it leads us down the road.
Now, the story gets even more bizarre. About an hour after that press conference, the DA's office released a scathing statement about it, saying, quote, without providing any advance notice to the prosecutors pursuing this case in court or the Gilgo Beach Homicide Task Force members investigating these murders day in and day out, we watched today's press conference not knowing what was going to be reported. We will continue to investigate this case through the grand jury process and not through press conferences. The victim's family's attorney also revealed evidence that he says connects Heuermann to two more women who were found dead on Long Island, Shannon Gilbert and Karen Brigada. Brigada may have allegedly been in Heuermann's house with his wife.
In the house was the wife of Rex Heuermann and Rex Heuermann and the other girl. The other girl who we believe to be Karen Brigada.
Heuermann has been charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of second-degree murder in the deaths of Melissa Barthelme, Megan Waterman, Amberlynn Costello, after DNA evidence tied him to the killings. He's also the prime suspect in another case. Now, joining me now is Robert Macedonio, attorney representing... Macedonio, I apologize. I actually practiced it before I started, too. Who joins us now. I appreciate it. All right, you've got a lot to respond to here. Let me just let you respond and to what we just heard.
Dan, I think the DA's statement says it all. It's hard to take anyone serious wearing a purple hat at a press conference. Johnny Ray has tried to keep himself relevant in this case since the arrest of Rex Heuermann. It's been stated several times, not only by the police commissioner who stood by him, by the DA's office, that Shannon Gilbert, who's Johnny's client, is not related to any of the other Gilgo victims. So what he's desperately trying to do is link a civil defendant to his clients so he has somebody to sue to recoup the tens of thousands of dollars he has spent chasing his tail the past 12 years that he's been involved in this case.
So is it not true?
Completely outlandish claims. I categorically deny him on behalf of Asa Ellerup. It's just ridiculous.
So again, yeah, just to follow up on that, not true that she knew about the sex workers.
It's not true. Look, taking an iron. You're going to fight with someone taking an iron. You go back, the allegations go back several years ago. The children are 34 and 26 now. So they were what? Teens, if not younger. The house is very small. Everybody's seen the house. So the allegation is small children are upstairs in the house while Rex has sex workers downstairs in the house. It makes no logical sense. It's a nice middle-class neighborhood. The houses are all very close together. Any of this would have been witnessed by any of the neighbors. It's just, it makes no relevant sense. Like I said, you go back to the purple hat. He looks like he's more trying out for a part in the Willy Wonka movie than he is representing any victims.
What? It's I had to hear that line again. I just thought it was so.
It brings a
One
smile.
of the things that with this though is when John Ray, and again he's been involved in this case longer than any other attorney. He represents the family of Shannon Gilbert. But the allegations when he did the press conference with Rodney Harrison, Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison, I immediately said, he's all over the place with these allegations. And the witness or witnesses, he claimed he had 4 witnesses, only 2 of them signed an affidavit. There was some information they gave that can be vetted, that can be checked. This happened, this press conference was over a month ago. I don't see anything happening because Asa Ellerup signed on for a $1 million deal. If she was involved in this, I think an attorney would say, no, don't do it yet. Let's see where this goes. Bobby, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm disturbed by that hat and that tie, both. But my thoughts on the substance of the allegations is, again, I'm sure that the task force has looked into these things, and you also have to remember there's a civil forfeiture arm to this. If she does profit from it now, and if she's later found to have any kind of culpability, there can be civil proceedings to get that money back, or the government can actually get it. If it's Peacock's money, the government then could get it. So, but what he said, maybe he didn't bring the sex workers back to the house. But when I was talking about culpability after the fact was, if she knows her husband's this philandering guy who visits a lot of sex workers, and then she kind of maybe happens upon some clothing in his car once, and she's fed up with him and gets rid of it, and that clothing turns out to be clothing of one of the victims ultimately, now she has possibly some culpability. Now she may have not known the girl was murdered or one of the victims, but she knows her husband is visiting sex workers. They had a long marriage. It would be surprising to me if she didn't know that he had some of the predilections going on in his life. Even though she was out of town at the time, he seemed to be pretty prolific with his behavior. And it would be hard for me to believe that she didn't know anything. She might have been looking the other way, thinking he's just visiting prostitutes. That's his thing. She may not have known he was killing them, obviously. But I think that she may have inadvertently done something like that. So she may have culpability. But again, I'm sure the task force is running all this stuff down. I mean, it really did surprise me that, the PC was next to that lawyer at the press conference. And then hours later, the prosecutor's office comes back and really kind of puts the brakes on that stuff. I would expect it from the lawyer. I wouldn't expect the PC to be there kind of lending credibility to some of those claims.
I think there was some tension between District Attorney Ray Tierney and outgoing Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison, who we all agree brought some NYPD know-how out to Suffolk County. And in a case that was unsolved for 12, 13 years, 14 months later, they have someone in handcuffs. So that cannot be denied. And it seemed to me, and we said early on in this case, that District Attorney Ray Tierney never met a camera he didn't like. The guy was on TV more than you write for Criminal Minds. He was more than you're a talking head on News Nation and CNN and Fox. The guy was on TV. And we, as NYPD guys, we said, whoa, this should be the PC doing this, not the district attorney. So we were a little concerned. And so I think that the reason why Rodney Harrison stood next to John Ray was that as the case moves forward, John Ray could very well be a defense witness. Didn't you tell the police about all this evidence you had? You did, yeah. And Rodney Harrison checked it out, and we looked into it. And we found out there was no basis for it, or there was a basis for it, and that's why we looked into it.
Right.
But I think that's the reason. Phil, you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to say kind of a question to Bobby. Now, I have to agree with Macedonia said there. He said, kids in the house, prostitutes, the wife, a serial killer, and Bobby knows better than any of us. I mean, we've all had some, encounters with serial killers, but, he works with profilers. It doesn't sound like that would be the profile of a serial killer, Bobby. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're correct.
Too much going on, right?
Yeah, I would be really surprised if he was that sloppy. You just don't get away with something for that long being that sloppy. Although I will say that I saw an interview of a neighbor on the block very early on after the arrest, and the guy said, "Look, my son grew up on this street, and we knew that guy, and now he's an adult and he lives down south." And I called him up when I heard the arrest. I said, "Hey, remember that guy? Remember the serial killer at the end of the street? They used to refer to Huberman as the serial killer at the end of the street. He was the weird guy, and they didn't actually know he was a serial killer, but they jokingly referred to him as that while the kid was growing up. And he calls his son and says, "Remember the serial killer that lives down the street? He's actually a serial killer." So like he actually had enough bizarre behavior that some of the neighbors would refer to him as that. Now I'm sure it was like more of a joke type of thing. But you're right, Phil. I think that serial killers do not. You just don't do that. You're much more. They're much more careful. They're much more methodical, or else they wouldn't get away with it for so long. Somewhere along the line, if he was that sloppy, he would have made a mistake, and you'd see it. And the kids would be there. Now the kids are adults and stuff, and stuff. It would be hard for me to believe that they saw anything of substance or saw anything of value to the investigation and didn't come forward and say something.
That was a wild sex party is what they described. A wild sex party and a serial killer, in my mind, are two totally different things.
Absolutely.
One of the things, and I have it with me at all times, the 32-page probable cause affidavit against Rex Human. And on page 18, they search his computer. And they show some of the outrageous things he was searching: child porn, rape videos, all this stuff. My question is to you, Bobby, can a man that has this life, this private life, not show outward signs of it in his everyday personality?
Well, it depends. Like Phil was just saying, so if you're a swinger, it doesn't mean you're a serial killer, right? And so there might have been it depends what you're talking about. These outward indicators are. If he's just a weird guy that the neighbors know is weird, that's not a serial killer. If he's a swinger, that's not a serial killer. There's different things, and now we're looking for it in reverse, right? We're deconstructing it, and of course we know we kind of think he's a serial killer now. We think the allegations will hold up, but all those other odd behavior things, now we see them all as part of his routine and his serial killing. But taken on their own individually, I don't know that any of them say this guy's a serial killer.
Absolutely. But I mean, they were able to search his computer remotely, which just is another sort of cool trick that they could do now that we couldn't always do. And finding this information out, as I said, I mean, I think he was an abusive husband, at least psychologically abusive. And obviously, if he had money, he was blowing all his money on his secret life and his 279 guns, which they also want back, I believe, so that they could sell the guns.
Sure.
But he had 279 guns in a safe in his house, a very small house, but he kept a safe for those 279 guns. That's not so usual for a serial killer either, and because he wasn't using these weapons, if we believe he is the serial killer, he wasn't using them to kill these young women.
And there's a thing that happens too with these cases, and we have to, you don't have to separate it. And I don't mean to kind of make light of anything, but these people do have lives. So Rex Human did have a life. He went to work. He had an office. He had coworkers there. And so he, we tend to make these guys out as monsters. No question. They're evil monsters. But before they're caught, they have a life. I mean, the last serial killer I worked when I was working was 2011, Israel Keys. He had an 11-year-old daughter. He used to braid her hair and send her to school. And so they have lives that now that we have the lens to look at it, we tie everything in their life back to the serial killing. But they had lives, they had activities, they had hobbies, totally unrelated to the serial killing. And so you know, we have to be careful about not looking at every part of his life and tying it back to, see, we should have known because this. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes these guys are good at having facades. Now, this guy did have some, you know, some really weird behaviors, but again, it's behavior that other people have too that aren't serial killers. And so like, you know, not everybody that goes to a swing club is a serial killer, obviously. And so I think that you have to parse away that stuff and go, well, yes, now it kind of indicates something, but on the surface of it, you know, nobody missed anything simply because they said, oh, they should have known he was a serial killer because he went to sex workers. Well, lots of people go to sex workers that don't kill them and aren't serial killers.
Good point. But after the fact, everyone says, oh, I knew he was a serial killer, you know.
Even the neighbor on the block.
Oh, I'm Preston now. I knew that guy was the Long Island serial killer, you know. Crazy. But let's get back to the whole point of this documentary and the fact that, you know, the family obviously was left destitute. He was their only source of income. There seems to be some problems within the family, potentially. I know that they have a special needs son, even though I think he's 36 years old. The daughter actually worked with Rex in his architecture firm in the city. So not only did they lose Rex's income, they lost her income too, because she worked for him. And so all of these things made, I think, the family sort of sympathetic. Many people that have followed this case are sympathetic that the family was left broke and they were left destitute. And I mean, I always felt my cop sense that they somehow knew, and if they didn't know, there were signs in his behavior that showed he was not a good guy.
That's what we talk about. Like, you knew he was weird, you knew he was kind of, but what did you know? Like, you know, you don't make that leap to he's the Long Island serial killer. That's a tough leap to make. You know he's weird. You know he's probably visiting prostitutes or something. And while you may know that, I don't think that extra leap, I think that's the hardest leap to make, is to know that your father is that kind of, you know, we now know, I mean, the daughter of is it BTK? One of the daughters of a serial killer is now.
Yeah, I think it's BTK.
BTK. Yeah, I mean, she's going around and she's kind of like in the true crime world and stuff and kind of giving an insight a little bit. But I also know there was a serial killer out here in San Diego. I think that, you know, the first thing the two grown kids had to do was move away and change their names. They had to legally change their names because this guy's name was all over the place. And they had to move away, get away from the geographic area. Their lives are ruined. And they had to start over again. And they couldn't, it was almost like they went into witness protection. They didn't, but like they had to move away, not tell anybody where they were from or their prior life, because that's held against them. And a lot of times these families are vilified in some respects, you know, and it's a shame. I mean, we're seeing that in the Petito case with Laundrie's parents. I mean, now they may have some culpability in having helped him and stuff, but some of these families don't, and they do get vilified. They get tarnished by the behavior of that family member, and it's a shame. Now, the moral implications of, you know, this deal she's made with Peacock, you know, look, I'm in Hollywood. Morals don't exist. There's no moral.
They don't exist.
There's no moral standard here. The only thing that trumps money in Hollywood is politics. You can't get certain types of TV shows made, even though they will make money. I mean, we see that in Yellowstone, but there's a lot of backlash against Yellowstone because it leans more conservative to a conservative audience and stuff, and all of its, you know, franchises and stuff. You know, but I always say the only thing that really trumps money in Hollywood is politics, and the morality of it doesn't even come into play. I mean, and there's so much competition. You know, I think there was that I don't know, what was that owl case? Remember, it was supposedly an owl, the staircase. Remember the staircase case where the woman fell down the stairs. The husband was convicted of it, I think. And he said, you know, an owl flew into the staircase and knocked her down. And there was a documentary called The Staircase that came out after the trial, but they followed him around. They had access to him and his attorneys during the lead up to the trial. They had all this, what I thought was compelling footage. I was watching it, and he ultimately was convicted of the crime. And then the documentary came out afterwards, because I know there's just tremendous competition to get these things to market. I mean, we've all seen it. Even the fictionalized version comes out, like, you know, within weeks or months. They have some fictionalized version with actors playing the people nowadays. I mean, you can't. you know, like you guys said earlier, like it used to be there was some kind of waiting period, some kind of tasteful waiting period, and now, you know, with the competition of all the different streamers, there used to be only 3 networks. So now with all these different streamers competing for the same thing, I think this is the next logical step in that, and I think we're going to probably see it more often.
Absolutely. Let me play a little bit of this again from News Nation.
Crime doesn't pay. I've heard that so often. That's what they say anyway. We sure hope it doesn't pay, right? It shouldn't. The wrong thing to do. But if the crime is big enough and you're close enough to the action without being locked up yourself, sometimes you can come into money. And so can your lawyers. I call your attention to this week's court appearance in the accused Long Island serial killers case. That's Rex Heuermann, right? The guy who's been brought in and doesn't have bail. There's his wife in the middle. Reported at the time that she's actually the soon-to-be ex-wife. Her name is Asa Ellerup. She's been struggling financially, and things have been rough for her and her 2 adult kids. But they came to court for the first time in a Mercedes, and there was a TV crew in tow. And tonight we can report exclusively that Ellerup and the couple's 2 children signed a production deal with NBC Peacock for a documentary about their ordeal. News Nation's Paula Froelich reports that they're being paid at least $1 million for this. Their lawyers are getting about $600,000, and they may not be the only family pondering a payday like this, because Paula also reports that the family of Brian Kohberger has a similar offer, but has not signed on the dotted line yet.
So again, that's, you know, Brian Kohberger, of course, is the accused of the Idaho 4, the students at University of Idaho. And did his family refuse to do it out of moral convictions, or were they afraid they would put them in the mix? I would like, you know, I'd like to know that answer, but it just, I don't know. I have a bit of a problem with this. I think I really do. And many people that watch true crime say, "Oh, you guys are doing the same thing." Well, I'm not related to a serial killer and signing on a dotted line to do a documentary about that serial killer. So, yeah, we do report on this, but I think it's a lot different than what, you know, doing a documentary when your husband, your father, is accused of being the Long Island serial killer. Phil.
Billy, I'm glad that Bobby brought up the BTK killer, because that family was taken completely by surprise. Now, the chance that this family was taken completely by surprise exists as well. And we do note there were reports that the architecture firm that closed down where the daughter worked, the mother lost insurance, everyone lost insurance, they all lost the income. So again, now somebody's offering you $1 million at a time when you don't have health insurance. And I believe they said she was diagnosed with some form of cancer. They're living in a home that was kind of uprooted because of the search warrant. It didn't take much convincing for them to sign on to this documentary. So again, I know we're kind of playing devil's advocate on both sides, but the possibility does exist that she was out of the country. Maybe the children were away when these, you know, horrific things took place, and they really didn't have any knowledge of his, you know, serial killing. Perhaps he was visiting sex workers. We don't even know if they knew about that. So if they were taken by surprise, their lives were turned upside down. And I guess you could even call them victims of this whole thing. So now they're, you know, getting a life ring. You know, somebody's throwing them a life ring, $1 million to, you know, sign on to this documentary. And I don't think it took much convincing when you're in that position, you know?
Absolutely. Folks,
you know, sorry, good.
And I was just going to do a quick commercial. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. If you want to contribute to us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel memberships with 5 different levels. And we appreciate all our subscribers, our fans, our friends, and they've helped this show stay alive for the better part of 4 years. Let me come back. Bobby, you had a comment before I so rudely went to a commercial.
No, I'm sorry. Like, yeah. So I don't know. You guys know, I actually, for the first time in my life, recently served on a jury. So I was picked for a jury trial recently, and it was a murder trial. a murder in the first degree with special circumstances, which in California means it could be the death penalty, which isn't really on the table much here. So I was a juror for 5 months in this murder trial, and I was the jury foreman. I was elected the jury foreman. Now, having 30 years in law enforcement and 27 as the FBI agent and a law degree, you know, I've always been dismissed when I show up every year dutifully for court and jury duty, and I always get dismissed. And this year, for some reason, the defense counsel had challenges, preemptory challenges, and could have gotten rid of me for no cause, and they didn't. And I stayed on the jury for 5 months. One of the things the judge told us in the first day when they swore us in as a jury is California law says you have to wait 90 days after the verdict is recorded before you can enter into a contract to sell your story. So all the jurors, look, Dateline was in the courtroom the whole time. This was a big murder case here, and the jurors are now being told that you have to wait 90 days, but the jurors are all signing contracts or about to sign contracts to sell their story as jurors. So, you know, there's always, you know, and I'm in the true crime world, there's always, you know, money floating around for the right projects to go. And there's such competition now, so many streamers, and there's, you know, the money starts getting thrown around, and that's what we're seeing in this case. And I think this is the first one, not the first one. I think this is an extension. It's been getting quicker and quicker and quicker. And I think this may be what we see from now on.
Except, Bobby, when they ask us to be talent, they never want to pay us.
Of course not. No.
Law enforcement, they never want to pay us. They always say, we'll fly you here, we'll fly you there, we'll pay you per diem, we'll pay for your meals. How much do I get? Oh, there's no money to pay you.
Yeah, right.
Like you know what else? Wants to go on a field trip, you know?
You know what else too, Bob? You brought it up before. There's such fierce competition. So I think the first person that gets to, and the lawyer was connected to a production company, lawyer for the children. So I guess it wasn't too hard to get, you know, be the first one in it. And again, with all the competition, you were talking about it earlier, and the way that Hollywood is, and with all the money they're throwing around, the only thing that tops money is politics, like you said. So I could see how this kind of happened quicker than would have happened in previous cases. But you know, and her being was kind of like the perfect storm, if that's all true. She has no knowledge of anything. You know, the rug gets pulled out from under them, no insurance, no income. She's diagnosed with cancer. Now they throw the money at her. It all was like the perfect storm, and for her to sign on. So I guess you know, they could be, you know, viewed as victims as well.
I understand they also could be seen as they're, even if they didn't know, they're still benefiting from their father/husband's crimes. You know, kind of, they are. Yes. You know, but you know, as distasteful as that might seem, we have a First Amendment in this country, and you're allowed to speak and say your story. And if you're not criminally culpable or civilly liable, then you know, then you can do it. It may be distasteful, it may not be the right thing to do, but there's nothing legally, either criminally or civilly, that prevents you from doing that.
Absolutely. You know, it goes on the, you can't believe this. And this is Rex Schumann now is corresponding by letter with the Happy Face Killer.
Right now, moving to another case that we've been following very, very closely, as the family of the accused Gilgo Beach murder suspect Rex Schumann said to earn $1 million for a new documentary about the case and upcoming trial. This Nation's Laura Engel live on Long Island. We're also learning, Laura, that the convicted serial killer says that Schumann wrote to him. Like, bring us up to speed on what we're hearing today.
Yeah, Connell, there's a lot going on in the background of this case. We're talking about money, a deal with a documentary, and now this handwritten letter going from jail to prison. All of this going on in the background of one of the largest serial killer investigations that our country has seen in recent years, with the family member, the suspect and the family members here involved in this case, each communicating in different ways. And that is what is going on here. Rex Schumann, who has been arrested and charged with 3 of the murders in the Long Island serial killer case this summer, has only had a couple of visitors in jail. And most recently, we've reported this, that it was his estranged wife, Asa Ellerup, who filed for divorce just 6 days after his arrest. The New York Times and Forbes reporting today that Ellerup and her 2 adult children have signed on with the Peacock Network for this 7-figure documentary deal. It's a story that was first reported by News Nation. The bidding war for the family story sparked an outcry from the relatives of the women whose remains were found along Ocean Parkway on Long Island. The sister of Shannon Gilbert, one of the main ones here, taking to X, writing this: disappointed, disgusted, flabbergasted, frustrated are just a few words that come to mind right now. Now, while Huerman's wife is making the documentary, her husband has exchanged writings with convicted killer Keith Jesperson, otherwise known as the Happy Face serial killer. So a really odd occurrence here. Jesperson wrote to Huerman to encourage him to come clean and confess if he is guilty. He has written to other serial killers and accused serial killers before. Huerman responded, writing in part, "Thank you for your letters and advice. They have been a help and a comfort to me. I do understand what you have said, and I have taken it to heart." Jesperson then sent Huerman's response to podcaster Keith Revere for safekeeping. Listen to this.
Sometimes I think the most important thing is what's not said in a letter. What is not said is, I'm innocent. I'm not guilty. I did not do this. We didn't get any of that. And when I read this, I read it almost like I got a sense of how he was writing it, like a peace and a calm about him, not worried about anything, almost reserved into the fact that, like, acceptance, where I know I'm guilty.
And no word if this correspondence is going to continue on. Right now, we can tell you that Rex Huerman is expected back in court in February, while this documentary here on Long Island goes on.
A consciousness of guilt, Professor Mike Geary. Say it.
Yeah, Billy, consciousness of guilt.
Killer. Isn't that a consciousness of guilt?
Well, interesting. I mean, in a way, you probably you're not going to get it before a jury, but interesting that he wouldn't say, thank you very much for your kind and thoughtful and earnest words, Mr. Happy Face, but I'm innocent.
Right.
And I'm going to fight these charges. The idea that he didn't do that and said, I'll take it to heart, and I'll think about it, that sort of thing. Yeah, to me, that's implying consciousness of guilt. But, it's jury's never going to know.
Well, it's like when Phil and I saw that interview with him. He goes, I'm Rex Huerman. I'm an architect. We live on Long Island. I'm married. I'm a serial killer.
I'm a fixer. I'm a serial killer.
Oh, yeah.
Phil, I want you to do a quick.
Sure. Joe Murray, attorney at law. Now, listen, guys, if you've found yourself in some type of jam with, let's say, a DWI or anything up to, murder, you have Joe Murray on the screen, a terrific criminal defense attorney. He's not only a criminal defense attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. So he literally knows both sides of defense. You could reach Joe at his website, jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you could email Joe at joe@jmurray-law.com. Joe's a big supporter of police off the cuff real crime stories, and we think he's a terrific criminal defense attorney.
But very well done, Phil. I just want to go around once with everyone. I think this was a very interesting case we covered here. First, I want to, for our women fans, I want to put this picture up of this macho.
I look terrible.
I couldn't find the scuba diving one, so I had to substitute this one. That's Bobby. Bobby, I forgot to tell the audience. Bobby writes for Criminal Minds.
Used to write for Criminal Minds.
Him and Jim Clementi, another FBI agent. These guys also, they just collect law degrees on their way through the FBI, just like Mike Geary got his going on the NYPD. I find that amazing. I know, Bobby, you got yours before you went on the FBI, right. So at least you lived the life of a student, not a student that had to work and go to school. That's got to be twice as hard, I would think, right?
I had several Nassau County cops and NYPD guys in my law school class.
And it's so tough to work and go to law school, right?
Yeah, and because I think it was because we offered a 4-year program, which means you didn't have the condensed time frame. It was a little more, and I think they didn't have night classes then. I don't know. I know Fordham used to offer night classes at law school, which really helped people working and stuff. But I had a good amount of people that were working and going to law school also at the same time.
Bobby, your final thoughts on this caper?
As you know, as much as I might get hate mail for it, you know, people have a First Amendment right to speak if they have no criminal culpability and no civil liability with respect to what they're saying. As distasteful as it seems, if his wife is not criminally liable, she has a right to make that deal. And I agree. I'm all about the victims, and I wish we should always do more for victims to protect them. But the laws as they stand now, the Son of Sam laws that were redrafted to adhere to the Supreme Court's decision, are much more narrow than they used to be. And so I think that as distasteful as it is, I don't think there's a legal barrier. Obviously, there's a moral barrier to it. But in our society today, those moral barriers, I don't know how much they exist anymore.
Bobby, as you said, the moral barrier in show business just doesn't exist. I mean, we could get into a whole other topic, but, Hollywood's been totally silent about the conflict in Israel and Gaza. They haven't said a word, and
there's no money to be made.
What's that?
There's no money to be made.
Yeah. But they're always putting their 2 cents in about everything else, but they're totally, even some of the most powerful Jewish people in Hollywood, not a peep out of them.
Right.
Which to me is a little bit disgraceful, I think.
Well, my friends in Hollywood that are Jewish are actually fearful for their own safety right now. They won't wear a Star of David outside now because the pro-Hamas.
That's really a shame.
Yeah, they're actually. I've gotten emails and had phone calls with friends that are actually, for the first time in their lives, they're Jewish Americans. They're afraid to be known as Jewish in this country. And so it's only getting worse. I mean, you guys know, you're in New York, what's happening with the tree lighting ceremony, and we know what's happened at the New York Post building. This is an aggressive movement, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas movement.
Yeah, it's 100%. Very scary. Professor Mike, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Billy, I think Bobby's right. And we should, and everyone who's watching should just be aware that it might seem very strange, but Asa Ellerup and her family, they might be complete innocent victims. And just because Johnny Ray says some affiant signed an affidavit believing that, this went on, 19 years ago, 15 years ago, it doesn't mean that these people haven't been, thrown shade on by Johnny Ray and these people who have a vested interest in perhaps doing this. Therefore, they may actually have suffered tremendously, and they may feel that, it's their chance to actually kind of right the ship for their own lives and move past. And you're going to need money and you're going to need time. And this gives them that opportunity. So, I don't feel that they've done anything wrong at this point.
Typical lawyer.
I'm sorry.
That was the good one, Billy.
Detective Phil, your final thoughts.
My final thoughts are this. This is 2023. This is the way things go. I don't think, it raised an eyebrow. Is it illegal? Of course not. It's not. They found ways through laws to, finance Asa Ellerup and the attorneys, and they're going to do that. And I want to make one quick comment about what you said earlier, Billy. As far as us doing this show, and we're doing the same thing, maybe, making a couple of bucks off it, I think that we have a lot of integrity. I'm doing this show almost 3 years with you, Billy. It's about 2.5 years. We have integrity. We have professionalism. We don't go into the weeds. We don't go into conspiracy theories. We try to stick to the facts. And I think that that's kind of comforting for victims, perhaps. And we tell the people of, what we think might be happening in cases and stuff like that, what the outcomes might be. So, again, we're not becoming millionaires off of this. Nobody offered us $1 million, but I think that our professionalism and our integrity is intact to this very moment.
Very well said. And Phil, just because you're 3 years, you're not getting a raise. Don't bring it up on the air. Cops never get paid.
You read right through that.
Cindy Goddard, thank you so much for the $10 super sticker. And for those that gave me super stickers that I missed because we were in such deep conversation.
Yeah, we had a good conversation
for all your support. Bobby Chacon, thank you so much for coming on with zero notice. I notified you today. You said, yeah, I'll come on. that's indicative of like us having no life, right?
Yes. That's my life right there.
Professor Mike Geary. Oh, there's your wife, your dog there.
Yeah, that guy. I got to feed him right after.
All right.
And he's a
Professor
big guy.
Mike, thank you for coming on. And Detective Phil, thank you so much. And folks, you in the audience, thank you so much for listening. On behalf of Police Off the Cuff, have a great night and God bless.
Stay safe, everyone.
Good night.
One episode just ain't enough.